This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Dozens killed after Somali militants attack a hotel in the port city of Kismayo. We look at the deteriorating fate of migrants and refugees in Africa, Europe, and America. And leaders of Angola, DRC, Uganda, and Rwanda agreed to amicably settle the regional disputes. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. How the conflict between herders and farmers in Nigeria is impacting the price of cattle and beef. And a South African engineered solution for tackling congestion in public health care facilities. We begin in Somalia, where security forces have ended an overnight attack by the Al-Shabaab militant group in the port city of Kismayo. At least 26 people have been killed. Members of the Al-Qaeda-linked group stormed a hotel after targeting it with a car bomb on Friday. Local elders and lawmakers were meeting in the hotel to discuss approaching regional elections. Al-Shabaab is trying to topple the government and has been responsible for many terror attacks in Somalia. Meanwhile, Somalia has welcomed back more than 100,000 former refugees from Yemen and Kenya. But now the influx of Somali returnees from Kenya has worsened the humanitarian crisis in a country that is already dealing with a high number of internally displaced persons. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has the story.
These returnees are the latest to arrive in Somalia. For close to 3 decades, the Dadaab refugee camp in northern Kenya was their home, as conflict ravaged most parts of their country. In 2013, Somalia, Kenya, and the UN refugee body signed a tripartite agreement that supports the voluntary return of refugees back to Somalia, a process that has seen a huge number of returnees resettled in various parts of the country.
Since 2015, we have repatriated 84,000 people, mainly young people, school-aged children. Many people are coming back their own way without support of repatriation assistance. In Dadaab alone, there were 500,000, and now it's 200,000. That means all others came to Somalia because we have the figure for repatriated people, which is 84,000.
However, the return of the refugees, mainly from Kenya, has increased the burden on the government's ability to cater for the needs of vulnerable communities affected by years of conflict and climatic shocks. Since 2010, more than 2 million displaced persons moved to the capital, Mogadishu, and other major cities where government and aid agencies provide life-saving assistance to the displaced families. A devastating famine and recurrent drought mostly affected farmers and the pastoral community.
The biggest challenge is housing, healthcare, and education for returnees, especially children. Unemployment is also a big threat. Families cannot sustain their livelihood due to competition. We have more than 2 million people living as IDPs. Somalia needs much support to handle the growing influx of returned from Kenya and Yemen.
More than 200,000 Somalis are believed to be residing in the Dadaab complex. But Kenyan authorities insist on closing the facility while blaming it for rising insecurity in parts of that country. Rights groups and the government of Somalia, however, warn Kenya against any forced repatriation.
We have an agreement with Kenya that no refugee will be forced to return. The exercise has to be voluntary, as agreed in the tripartite agreement between Kenya, Somalia, and the UNHCR. Kenya cannot force people out of Dadaab. It has signed the Geneva Convention and must protect refugees.
Close to 40,000 refugees have also returned from Yemen as conflict rages on in the Arab nation. Somalia says it's ready and willing to accept its nationals returning back home, but wants international support to ensure that these former refugees restart a new dignified life in a safe place which they can call home. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and return to our top story, where security forces end hotel siege in the port city of Kismayo. At least 20 people have been killed. Members of the al-Qaeda-linked group Al-Shabaab stormed a hotel after targeting it with a car bomb on Friday. For the latest from Somalia, we are joined live from the capital, Mogadishu, by CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo. Abdulaziz, thank you for taking time out to join us here on Africa Live. Well, it's yet another daring attack by Al-Shabaab militants. What is the latest from Kismayo, and are there more casualties? Talk to us, Abdulaziz.
Well, it's been a sad day here in Somalia, and especially in southern Somalia, port city of Kismayo, where militant group Al-Shabaab detonated an explosive-laden vehicle outside the Asasi Hotel, a popular hotel in the port city of Kismayo, where politicians and government officials, former and current, were meeting to strategize on the upcoming elections and their potential challenge to President Ahmed Mohamed Islam of Jubaland, who's seeking re-election in Jubaland. So the attack happened last evening, and after that explosion detonated, several gunmen managed to storm the facility and shot dead more than 26 people, according to the president of that regional state. Now, among those killed include notable individuals here in Somalia, including former government officials and current government officials, including a presidential aspirant for Jubaland state who was killed in that attack. Several lawmakers from the region were also wounded. So the death toll is 26, the injuries is 56, and include foreigners, some of them Tanzanian nationals, Kenyan nationals, as well as 2 Chinese nationals who are injured in that attack. Now, what we've been able to gather is that apart from the politics that was taking place there, the meeting by politicians to strategize on the election, there were also members of the business community who are there, potential investors who came to the port city of Kismayo to look at possible areas where they can invest, and that's when this tragedy happened. So it's a sad day in Somalia. The burial ceremony has taken place in Kismayo. Most of the dead have been buried, and the country is slowly coming to terms with the aftermath of the hotel in Kismayo attack.
Well, Abdulaziz Billo, a sad day indeed, but let's talk about what we do know. We know that the local elders and lawmakers had been discussing a planned regional election. Do you think they were the target of this attack?
Most likely they were the target, because Al-Shabaab has on most occasions tried to create an atmosphere here in the country whereby events cannot happen, meetings cannot happen, conferences cannot happen, elections cannot happen. That's the end game of the militant group Al-Shabaab, to sow instability and create chaos so that people can know that they're in charge, and democracy and government-related events cannot happen. So that is their end goal. But then again, the hotel that was attacked, as I say, most of those people who are living there are opposition lawmakers who are seeking to oust Ahmed Mohamed Islam, who is the president of Jubaland state. So most of them, that was their base, and this is most likely why it was a target. But then again, Al-Shabaab has repeatedly tried to create chaos in environments where elections are taking place, including Mogadishu, where Al-Shabaab takes advantage of the election mood to create chaos so that events and major events in the country here don't happen. But generally, to talk about Kismayo, is a very stable city in southern Somalia. No major attacks have ever happened. The regional administration there has been very tough, has managed to contain the threat of Al-Shabaab, owing the fact that Kenyan forces are also stationed in Jubaland, who have played a pivotal role in securing that region of the country. So how this attack happened remains a big challenge, and one thing we have noted is the attackers wore the police uniform. So this brings to question how available government staff uniform are available to these Al-Shabaab terrorists. But then again, Al-Shabaab has carried out several attacks outside Kismayo, targeting the Senguni military base, where Kenyan forces and Somali forces have a base. But this is the first large-scale attack inside Kismayo, inside the port city of Kismayo.
All right, well, there you have it. Abdulaziz Billo, thank you for bringing us this story. We appreciate your insights, and we certainly appreciate your perspective. A year has passed since Ethiopia and Eritrea agreed to a peace deal, breaking a stalemate that had existed 2 decades between the two states. While relations have improved, Ethiopia and Eritrea have yet to implement their new political and economic relationship. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Eritreans living in Ethiopia no longer feel the need to hide their nationality. Air transport between the two states is open, but all 4 border crossings between the two countries are closed from the Eritrea side, with no explanation over why. Analysts say a year has passed since the peace agreement, and now both countries must work on implementing special status protocols.
They should work properly on the rules and regulations, which can make the friendly relationship a very good one. Like, for instance, there is a good relationship between Djibouti and Ethiopia. There is a special one. There is special treatment for also between Kenya and Ethiopia, as they are neighbors. So probably they need to negotiate that kind of proper and special treatment of each other, because both will benefit from these treaties. So this one, I think, will take time for them to come with a good plan.
Some citizens, however, remain skeptical about the truce. Kiflum fled Eritrea 4 years ago. He is now a refugee in Ethiopia. He volunteers at the Jesuit Refugee Service, where he assists fellow refugees with online courses. Quite a contrast from his expertise in geographic information systems back home.
No, because I fled from my country because of the political situation, but I don't think to go back to my country.
Like many other Eritrean refugees, he is banking on a new law passed by Ethiopia to allow refugees to work here, which would allow him to start afresh. Analysts say both countries must find peace within their territories to be able to maintain a practical friendship. Ethiopia must work to iron out the divisions within the ruling coalition and fight against ethnic discrimination, while Eritrea must reform some of its policies.
They should also resolve the internal conflicts they have within. When you go to Eritrea side, Isaias has to somehow be flexible and open, do some kind of reform like we have seen in Ethiopia, especially forgiving the opposition, those who left the country because they refused to be part of the national service, the military. Those kind of reform is also expected on that side.
Both countries are yet to make progress in establishing special joint economic zones, as well as a high-level committee to oversee the implementation of the agreement. As Ethiopia seeks economic progress, the country is keen to ensure that the truce with Eritrea holds. A major reason for this is that Eritrea's ports are more cost-effective as compared to Djibouti's, where currently Ethiopia's majority of goods enter and leave. And it is hoped that lasting peace will ensure economic prospects for both states. Coletta Njoyi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And still on returnees, 163 Nigerian migrants have been brought back to the country from war-torn Libya. The International Organization for Migration facilitated the return with support from some agencies of the Nigerian government. The returnees are the latest to be brought back home under the IOM Special Voluntary Assisted Return Program, which is being funded by the European Union. Here is CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
This particular trip back means a lot for the returnees, considering the war going on in Libya. Most of them expressed joy at being brought back home and deep regret ever embarking on the journey in the first place. They narrated horrible tales in Libya detention centers, where some of them said they spent about 8 months. Now, many of the migrants you actually find in detention centers across Libya are those who were intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard while attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea into Europe. Now, the UN and human rights groups have actually documented all manner of inhumane conditions in some of the facilities where these migrants are held. And there are even allegations that some of them are being used as human shields in the ongoing war. Now, some of the returnees are believed to be part of the inmates released from the recently targeted migrant detention center in Tripoli. In April, IOM said there are over 60,000 Nigerians still stuck in the North African country. And one can only wonder what the fate of those Nigerians are at this moment. This latest returnees bring up the total number of Nigerians who IOM has actually assisted back home from Libya to over 12,000 since the special voluntary repatriation program started in April 2017. Now, the fresh returnees are expected to go through a special reintegration program before they are then set up in any small enterprise of their choice. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Further afield, at least 700 undocumented migrants surged into a Paris landmark building on Friday, briefly occupying the memorial complex to demand talks on regularizing their status. CGTN's Chao Ngono has more on that story.
The Pantheon building, where the group staged demonstrations, is a symbol of great men representing the fight against slavery. Footage posted on social media platforms showed hundreds of people inside the building's main dome waving papers in the air. The so-called Black Vests is a Paris-based migrant association that takes its name from the Yellow Vest anti-government protest movement. Outside the landmark building, hundreds more were still gathering.
And then they said that they are going to let us out and release us without identity checks, and we were going to be quiet at home. But we were trapped when we went outside. The police had a barricade behind us and others were in front.
Undocumented migrants have for a long time been viewed as the voiceless and the faceless of the French Republic.
People came to denounce modern slavery, what it means to work without papers and to be illegalized.
These migrants who are asking for papers are exploited because they work under conditions that are not legal, and in addition, they risk being expelled.
The standoff lasted for several hours until the protesters were calmly evacuated. Chamrono, CGTN.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has declared the influx of migrants on the southern border a national emergency. Others call it a humanitarian crisis. CGTN's Nathan King has more from Washington.
U.S. President Trump has declared the influx of migrants and asylum seekers on the southern border a national emergency. The treatment of those migrants is being called a humanitarian emergency by his critics. Reports of children being separated from their parents, migrants denied showers, soap and toothbrushes have shocked many. Following recent high-profile visits to detention centres by U.S. lawmakers and immigration lawyers, the U.S. Congress has been holding hearings. Witnesses say they were shocked by what they saw.
I was and I remain shaken to my core by what I witnessed at Clint. I have 3 children of my own. They are 3, 6, and 9. I do not have the words to explain to them what is happening to children their age in America right now. Families belong together. Children belong free and with their loved ones. That is what is required by our Constitution, by our federal laws, and by our basic humanity.
But the Trump administration is not backing down. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence visited border facilities in Texas, looking to show the opposite side of immigration policy, a crisis which the administration says is being handled by professional officers with humanity who are simply overwhelmed by an influx of illegal immigration.
And while we hear some Democrats in Washington, D.C. referring to U.S. Customs and Border facilities as concentration camps, what we saw today was a facility that is providing care that every American would be proud of.
Meanwhile, the U.S. president confirmed that immigration officers will begin mass deportations of illegal immigrants with existing orders to leave starting on Sunday.
It starts on Sunday, and they're going to take people out, and they're going to bring them back to their countries, or they're going to take criminals out, put them in prison, or put them in prison in the countries they came from. We're focused on criminals as much as we can before we do anything else.
The Trump administration says there are 1 million deportation orders that have been issued in the U.S. that haven't yet been enforced. U.S. President Trump partially got elected on his tough stance on illegal immigration into the U.S., but stories of families being separated, of unhygienic and inhumane conditions also weigh on the American public. As we turn to election season, this is going to be a key election issue. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
The news continues on Africa Live. Let's take a sneak peek at what's coming up. Leaders of Angola, DRC, Uganda, and Rwanda agreed to amicably settle their regional disputes. And we tell you why Egypt has extended its state of emergency for another 3 months.
Africa, the most iconic wildlife destination in the world. Its unique ecosystems were formed over countless eons. Many people can only dream of visiting this natural paradise. But now, for the first time ever, CGTN Wild Wonderland live show is bringing Africa to you through all of our online platforms. 14 episodes from July 22nd to 28th take you to adventure through the Great Plains of Kenya's Masai Mara, the Serengeti in Tanzania, and the Greater Kruger Park in South Africa. Welcome aboard the wildest ride of a lifetime. This is Wild Wonderland live show, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. We now head to Angola, where 4 leaders from the Great Lakes region have committed to having open dialogues to resolve disputes touching on trade and security. Presidents Paul Kagame and Rwanda and Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni and Felix Tshisekedi of the Democratic Republic of Congo were hosted by Angolan President João Lourenço in the quadripartite summit that was held in the Angolan capital, Luanda. At the same time, President Kagame and his Ugandan counterpart Yoweri Museveni have pledged to resolve tensions between the two nations. Trade between the two neighbors has been severely affected since February after Rwanda closed her border with Uganda. The two countries have been accusing each other of spying and political interference. The Egyptian parliament has approved a presidential decree to extend the nationwide state of emergency for another 3 months. Egypt has been fighting terrorism since 2013, but the emergency state was imposed all over the country in April 2017 after dozens were killed and injured in 2 bomb attacks that targeted churches. CGTN's Adel El-Maraki has more.
Extending the emergency state is a clear statement. Egypt still believes terrorism threats are not over yet. The exceptional state of law gives security authorities the right to arrest suspects and inspect properties without prior judicial permits. While the most of Egyptians don't feel the impact of that state during their daily lives, in North Sinai, the situation is quite different.
Egyptians have been living under the emergency state since the 1970s. Its extension has become nothing more than a routine to them. The situation in North Sinai is different. Since 2013, it has seen an unprecedented wave of terrorism. Citizens in North Sinai do feel the restrictions. There's curfew imposed. They see how the security forces apply that privileges they have against any suspected behavior, because at the end, they live in an exceptional environment too.
While the number of attacks have sharply dropped thanks to the comprehensive counter-terrorism military operation in 2018, there are indications that terrorist attacks could be rising.
The emergency state helps the military operations decrease the rate of terrorist attacks. Sinai used to see more than 1,200 attacks annually, but now it's down to 700. That has decreased to just 8 or 10 in 2018. 2019, however, is seeing a growth in attacks. That is mainly because the jihadists shifted their tactics. They have increased their minor attacks like planting small roadside bombs, and they are focused more on the police forces instead of the army, who are lightly armed.
The Egyptian constitution stipulates that the emergency state must only be for a period of 3 months. It could be renewed with the parliament's approval. President El-Sisi has never seen any opposition against declaring or renewing the state of emergency from the legislative chamber.
Egypt has been quite effective with its 2018 counter-terrorism military campaign. The emergency state has been an integral part for the success of that campaign. But the country is realizing that security solutions alone are not going to solve that insurgency crisis. That's why the government is eyeing to invest some $6 billion in economic development in the Sinai. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, armed forces have been called in to assist the police fight against rampant levels of crime in some of Cape Town's most dangerous neighborhoods. The country's President Cyril Ramaphosa authorized the deployment of the army after the police failed to bring down the high levels of violent crimes. The move has been widely welcomed. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
The Cape Flats is on lockdown, with a heavy police presence in some of the city's most crime-ridden neighborhoods. They're here as part of a crime-fighting operation that will include the army. The South African National Defence Force are set to join the police in their anti-crime blitz, targeting criminals wanted for murders, robberies and drug offences. They will also be searching for weapons, and Philippi East is one area where the police have already begun their search and seizures. But some believe drugs is also a major problem.
I think they must first also have to look for these drug houses that are selling the drugs, and those drugs are promoting the young guys and people to steal when they are drunk. So I think that's better.
The police have struggled to contain the amount of drugs ending up in communities, even though they've committed enormous amounts of resources to their efforts. Just a few days ago, 11 people were killed in this neighborhood in just a 24-hour period, sparking massive outrage amongst many Cape Townians. Now, the South African National Defence Force has in the past assisted the police with bringing peace and stability to South African townships, including quelling issues around xenophobic violence. This operation, however, is a different scenario. That's because the armed forces will focus on issues such as gangsterism and drug smuggling. Catching wanted criminals is also high on the agenda, and many community members are happy they are coming.
We feel very excited at the same time and safer than the last time, because now we'll be more protected than we used to be, and surely they can do something about this because it's already getting out of hand.
I feel like we'll be protected, especially in those high crime areas. And then you find that it's difficult even for you to go to work. You find people are doing anything, whatever they like.
For now, though, the joint operation is expected to take around 3 months to conduct and could continue if the president feels that the saturation of forces in these communities still haven't sent a clear message to criminals that their time is up. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
South African struggle hero Dennis Goldberg, one of the 11 Rivonia trialists arrested across the country for plotting against the apartheid government in 1963, has received an honorary doctorate from the University of Cape Town, where he was once a student. The Rivonia trial led to Nelson Mandela's life sentence. Goldberg was the only white activist in the group and was imprisoned for over 2 decades. Renee Del Carme has more on that story.
The University of Cape Town was a white, right-wing institution during Dennis Goldberg's days as a young engineering student. Like Nelson Mandela, he had joined Umkhonto weSizwe, the armed wing of the African National Congress, to fight the apartheid regime, and used his engineering skills to carry out acts of sabotage against the state.
I'm rather pleased the university is catching up. I'm very honored that they honor me, and they honor an engineer. And Nelson Mandela said to me, Dennis, we're setting up Umkhonto, we need your technical skills, will you help? And somebody even had the humor to say, you know how to build it, do you know how to blow it up as well? And yes, I wanted to help.
Dennis Goldberg graduated with a degree in civil engineering here at UCT during the dark days of apartheid in 1955 and obtained 3 more degrees during his 22 years behind bars. Addressing his fellow graduates, Goldberg said he was happy to see that UCT was serious about atoning for the past.
When I look at this hall today and compare it to when I got my bachelor degree in 1955, there was a sea of white faces. There wasn't South Africa here. And today South Africa is here, on the platform, down there, getting degrees.
Who thought someone like me would be here as leader of this institution? Who thought that all these young black people that we see getting their doctorates today would be here today? And it's because of the fight that people like Dennis Goldberg put up, he had another choice. He could have gone on to live his privileged life. And the fact that he joined forces with his compatriots to fight against apartheid was critical.
UCT says Goldberg, who now has 5 honorary doctorates, represents the very best of the university's values and culture. And his courage and selflessness over the decades saw him become a central figure in South Africa's liberation and a moral beacon for the new South Africa. Renat Alkam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. We've got your business news coming up next. Here's a look at what's ahead. How the conflict between herders and farmers in Nigeria is impacting the price of cattle and beef.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Rising insecurity caused by deadly clashes between farmers and herders in Nigeria is causing a huge spike in prices of cattle and beef. Traders in the West African countries are currently struggling for livestock living off their livestock, threatening a way of life that goes back centuries. With the details, here is CGTN's Terry Wangari.
Muhammadu Buba is heading out to find grazing land for his cattle. Coming from a long line of nomadic pastoralists, Muhammadu has been rearing and selling cattle all his life. However, the escalating conflict between farmers and herders in central Nigeria has had a negative impact on both communities as well as the nation.
Sometimes I go to the market with 4, 5, 6 cows to sell. If it's a good market day, I sell everything, but most times I don't sell.
Climate change is also a key factor, with each year bringing harsher and longer droughts. This is pushing northern Nigerian pastoralists to the further south in search of pasture for their animals. According to recent data by the University of Ibadan, 15 out of the country's 19 northern states are struggling with desertification. Available grazing land in the north is diminishing at an alarming rate.
We are doing this business for long, but for this time around, the time change what we see for the business is too difficult as we are doing it before. Before, everywhere is too quiet, which means that not any big problem. But now the main problem between all these Fulani and buyers and the town people bring us so much problem for the business.
This market in the city of Yola is one of the 3 main cattle markets in Adamawa. It's here that northern Nigerian herders and traders from neighboring Chad and Cameroon bring their cattle for sale. But traders here say the numbers are declining at a staggering rate as prices continue to drop nearly by half.
As of 5 years ago, we used to buy cow like 250, 200, 150, but the largest one 250. But now those ones we used to buy 150 before, we bought it at the length of 250 now. We bought it at the length of 300. The one we used to buy 250 before, we bought it at the rate of 400, 350, 500.
We thank God for the market today. As you can see, I came with 4 cows and I've been able to sell 2. This is what is happening today at the Ngurore market.
With over 200 million people and an emerging middle class, Nigeria is currently witnessing a boom in demand for meat. According to estimates, the country consumes around 360,000 tons of beef each year, accounting for half of all West Africa. However, the worsening confrontations between farmers and herders are expected to bring these figures down as the country continues to grapple with a struggling economy. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
According to a World Bank report on Ghana's economy, the country is proving to be the fastest growing mobile money market in Africa. The report focused on financial sectors development and financial inclusion. As a result, the West African nation is witnessing an expansion in its financial services, startups, and small businesses. One such startup is carpooling company Rabba Rides. It operates on an app and leverages mobile money for payments. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Raufai reports from Accra. Let's take a look.
CC John is ordering a carpooling service. Like in many areas of the world, he's paying for it instantly on his phone using a mobile money service platform. He then waits for the car to arrive.
It's much convenient than the usual services we are all accustomed to. The fact that it's cashless as well makes it come without any controversy, the problem of looking for change and whatnot.
This carpooling service by startup company Rabba Rides can only be accessed through a mobile phone app. While that's common in cities like New York or Johannesburg and Nairobi, the concept is relatively new to Ghana. It's predicted that about 40 million mobile phones will be in use in Ghana by 2020. Growth like this means carpooling companies like Rabba Rides will be using mobile money services for payments more and more. Last year, Ghana introduced the operating system to allow mobile money transfers between all mobile networks and banks. The platform has so far recorded over 4.4 million transactions. However, startup company Rabba Rides says more needs to be done to improve mobile money services between different mobile networks.
A lot of the networks are kind of working in their own silos or their own systems in terms of mobile money. If you have to transfer from one to another, it's not as seamless as if you are transferring to the same network. So that might be an issue sometimes for most of the businesses that are trying to use that or platforms like us that is using that.
The Bank of Ghana says it's taking steps to streamline the mobile money service sector. It plans to introduce a new capital requirement for all institutions engaged in mobile money operation amid growing concerns.
By putting in place regulation, you try to ensure that operators, for example, put in place a robust system so that fraud is not perpetrated. The next thing we have done also to ensure that we have more players coming to the system so that it will engender competition.
Users of mobile money services like CC believe once the regulation is passed, it will get easier to use the platform, which in turn will boost the economy. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
As 5G networks and their devices pop up across China and around the world, one market report has found that the global high-end smartphone market shrank by a staggering 8% in the first 3 months of the year. So what does that mean for the rest of the market, and who will take the lead as a new era in communication begins? CGTN's Omar Khan reports.
With the smartphone landscape moving even closer to 5G, many anticipate a fresh wave of breakthrough technology. Faster speeds, better cameras for those beloved selfies, and new designs. But for both the global and Chinese smartphone markets, the numbers suggest a more toned-down outlook.
It's true that in recent years, both markets have seen smaller growth and even a decline at times. In fact, the Chinese market belongs to a seasonal and mature market on a global scale. When it comes to the replacement of phones, this impacts the growth of users, being relatively small or even seeing a decline.
According to market research firm Counterpoint, the first quarter of this year witnessed a steady 5% decline in global smartphone shipments, marking a 6th consecutive quarter headed towards this trend. But that somewhat bleak outlook doesn't bode true with Chinese tech giant Huawei.
Over the last 2 years, Huawei's rapid growth can be attributed to the company's dual brand strategy. It's indeed grown significantly, and especially when it reaches the first quarter, it should surpass Apple.
By Q1 2019, Huawei had surpassed Apple with a global market share of 17%, inclusive of its Honor brand. A year ago, the Shenzhen-based firm lagged behind Apple, yet despite the ongoing China-US trade war, the company is now even managing to slowly creep up on Samsung. Huawei's efforts in R&D and 5G could be propelling the company's growth.
If you take a look at the worldwide development of 5G, the clear focus and the clear front runners are on the Chinese market and on the Asian market. All new trends and all new technology leads are upcoming there.
In terms of scientific innovation, Huawei is a global leader at the 5G level. There are two reasons for this. First is that the company has focused on communication technology for a long time, from 2G all the way to 5G. And second, Huawei has created cooperation with upstream and downstream partners in the R&D field.
With 5G networks now beginning to commercialize in China, and with the rollout of 5G devices just around the corner, the global smartphone market is poised to see far-reaching changes in the near future. Omar Khan, CGTN, Guangzhou.
This is Africa Live. We have a lot more wonderful, amazing, and inspiring stories coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. A South African engineer's solution for tackling congestion in public health care facilities.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
A young South African engineer has created an innovative solution to dispense medicine to patients with chronic illnesses. It's called the Pele Box. It has the potential to drastically reduce waiting times and congestion in public health care facilities. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has that story.
31-year-old Neo Hutiri is the inventor of the Pele Box. The Pele Box allows health workers to stock the lockers with pre-packaged prescription refills, log the medicine on the system, and secure each locker. The system then sends out an SMS to let a patient know that their medication is ready for collection at their local clinic. Hutiri came up with the idea for Pele Box after having to queue for long for medicine at a public hospital.
My journey into health started by accident. So I was diagnosed with TB, and like millions of South Africans, I started going to my local clinic and in Bophelong Township in the Bao, which is where I used to live. And I was on treatment for about 6 months. And in that journey of me being in treatment, I think I can admit to being a very unhappy patient during that period. And my unhappiness was very much of, I know that I have to finish my treatment. I understand what is involved in me managing this disease, and I understand what is required of me.
At some public hospitals, patients can wait for hours for medication, while using Pele Box takes 36 seconds. According to Hutiri, the Pele Box also collects data for clinics, letting them know which patients are sticking to their treatments and collecting their medicine on time.
It will reduce the burden of our elders, our patients, to wake up in the morning by 3 o'clock in the morning, go and wait in the queues. Maybe you'll find out they'll be helped by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but they were there from morning. You'll find some of them are hungry, you know. So to us, it's a great initiative, and we're very happy for the ORAM to put this kind of machines that will help our chronic patients to get their medicine.
The launch was done in conjunction with PEPFAR. PEPFAR is the US government's initiative to help save the lives of those infected with and affected by HIV and AIDS around the world.
So, as everybody knows, South Africa has the world's largest HIV epidemic with 7.5 million people living with HIV/AIDS and about 200,000 people becoming infected newly every year. So it's the epicenter of the epidemic right here. And as such, South Africa has actually been the leader in the prevention, diagnosis, care, treatment of HIV to date. Today, the Pele Box system serves, though, as yet another example of the continued efforts to put patients at the center of that experience.
The Pele Box has already been tested at selected clinics in Gauteng with 100% success rate. There is no dispute. South Africa's healthcare system needs major reforms. Even government on a number of occasions admitted to this. The Pele Box will go a long way in alleviating the burdened health system. Yolisa Njambala for CGTN in Tembisa, South Africa.
Let's now head to Burkina Faso, where a prisoner is inspiring young people through his music. Roland Tapsoba is serving a 5-year sentence for fraud. And as Wilkester Nyabo reports, despite his incarceration, his music talent is being felt beyond the prison walls.
They say the best roses grew in very unlikely grounds. Behind the walls of Burkina Faso's Ouagadougou prison, which is popularly known as Mako, lies a rare singing talent. Roland Tapsoba, who is popularly known as Robli, is serving a 5-year sentence for fraud.
I was convicted and sentenced to 16 months in prison. I've done 36 months, 3 years. I have 2 years left.
Behind bars, he has found time to cultivate and exploit a talent in music, one which he never thought would put him on the national map.
Once you accept that you're in prison, you can start accepting other things. So really, I had a lot of ideas for the lyrics and everything. But at the beginning, I was a bit stressed. But after a while, I thought, no, why not start right now?
Through the prison support system, he was given a guitar by one of the prison guards who discovered his gift.
I think I detected his hidden talent, so I approached him and we talked and he agreed. Then I gave him a guitar. He plays it often and creates his own compositions. You saw it. He immediately played with his fellow prisoners. And I think it's great for him and it's also great for us.
Tapsoba sings in his native Moray and French languages, and his music is a blend of reggae and the local Warba sounds. He tackles social issues like unemployment while giving youth of Burkina Faso hope for a better tomorrow. With support from the prison and a local reggae star, Tapsoba has recorded his first album.
These are really good songs. Well, they are songs that can really go far. In my humble opinion, these songs can go very, very far.
We heard that he made this in the prison of Ouagadougou. We thought the message on his album really raises your consciousness. I really like when I hear the song Kombibisi. When I listen to it, it really moves me.
He hopes to build on his new talent and art as he looks forward to life after prison.
It is normal that when you do something bad, you end up in prison. But I think it is better to prepare for your exit. I have achieved my objective already, and I'm always looking forward to what to do so that even after prison, I can go on and also, why not, support other convicts.
For Tapsoba, this success has been long coming, and the walls of the Moka prison, it appears, cannot hold him back. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN.
And we've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't touch that dial, don't go away. Here's what's coming up. Amos set 6th fastest time in history, and Sifan Hassan